The central proposition of this bill is incredibly simple. Children under 14 years of age should not be incarcerated or otherwise punished under the criminal legal system. As I've detailed in the explanatory note and in my introductory speech, this proposition is consistent with current medical understanding of child development and contemporary human rights standards. Allowing kids as young as 10 years old to be incarcerated, on the other hand, flies in the face of our human rights obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and increases the likelihood of more serious reoffending, ultimately leaving our communities less safe. Now, I would expect it's uncontentious that kids don't belong in prisons. It's worth considering in concrete terms what's going on for the average 10-year-old kid. I mentioned when introducing the bill that my eldest daughter turned 10 just a couple of months ago. She still has a couple of years left in primary school. She's still losing her baby teeth. I think I mentioned before that gymnastics, dance classes and getting ice cream after dinner are just about the most important things in her world. Currently in Queensland, there are about 17 children aged 10 to 13 years old in detention on any given day, which is about 9% of the detention centre population. There are also, on average, about 4 children under 14 held in a police watch house on any given day. By raising the age, we'd end up diverting around 130 children between 10 and 13 years old from prison and about 316 from the watch house each year in Queensland. The fact that this is a relatively small number of children at any point in time means it's entirely feasible to move these kids out of prisons and watch houses and into safe housing. Now, this bill obviously isn't just about First Nations children, but the statistics make clear that these are the kids suffering most as a result of the current law. Queensland has the greatest proportion of First Nations children under 14 held in detention of any Australian state. Although figures aren't available for children aged 12 and 13 years old, First Nations children account for around 60% of all children aged 10 and 11 in contact with the Queensland Police Service, and their overrepresentation increases with each escalation of statutory intervention. Research suggests that diverting more children away from the criminal legal system and providing support to address their individual needs will mean these children are less likely to continue to engage in criminal behaviours throughout their lifetime. As Amnesty International pointed out in their report on raising the age, children arrested before the age of 14 are 3 times more likely to reoffend as adults than children first arrested after they're 14 years old. While the current age of criminal responsibility may temporarily limit some immediate risks to the community while some children are in detention, diversion, and particularly for children under 14, is likely to be far more effective in improving community safety. The government should take a justice reinvestment approach, moving investment from prisons into community programs and therapeutic services. Not only are these programs proven to be more effective than criminalisation, but they're also cheaper. It costs more than $1,600 to keep one young person in detention for one day, and that doesn't even include the government's enormous capital spend building and expanding youth prisons, more than $30 million in this financial year alone. The medical evidence, human rights advice and statistics are crystal clear. We must act now to ensure children under 14 years of age are not incarcerated or otherwise punished under the criminal legal system. Thanks very much. I look forward to your questions.
Are you concerned, or do you have hold any concerns that it might make it easier for organised crime groups or other gangs in the community to recruit the people in the age group of 10 to 13 into a life of crime if the age of responsibility is lifted?
There is, under the Criminal Code in Section 7, what's described as the Doctrine of Innocent Agent, which I can read an excerpt from a judgment here if you're interested in hearing the way that the courts applied it previously. But essentially, it provides that when a person with intent uses another innocent person as an instrument of the commission of offences, that it's the person providing that direction who actually falls afoul of the law. But I think, if I take a step back a little bit from that particular case and provision, what's kind of implicit in the question is that if a young person is being used by criminal syndicates, gangs, other criminals to commission offences, that they should then be held criminally responsible for their action, despite the, I guess, the influence of those outside actors. And I guess I would kind of disagree that that's, you know, that's a position we should take, or that's very, you know, readily justifiable.
Sure. I noticed that you've given us a final report from the ACT.
That's right.
And that the government down there at the moment is a coalition of Labor and the Greens. Is this the type of policy we could expect from a future Labor-Greens government here in Queensland?
There's no value in me engaging in crystal ball gazing at this juncture, I don't think. But I would suggest that, I mean, it's excellent policy that's based in the evidence, and I would think this is the kind of reform that actually every jurisdiction around Australia should be taking. The fact that it's a Labor and Greens coalition in the ACT that's delivering it, I think, is kind of telling of just what kind of excellent evidence-based policy and law reform you might see coming out of that kind of coalition.
You've talked a little bit about brain development and young people not having that impulse control. Can you detail what are some of the kinds of key crimes that in between ages of 10 to 14 that young people are committing?
Yeah, I think I touched on this before, but they're very rarely, you know, violent crimes being committed by kids in this younger age group. It's far more likely to be, you know, thrill-seeking, risk-taking crimes like theft, like burglary, like, you know, whether it's stealing or jumping in a stolen car and going for a ride. You know, ill-considered behaviours that, that I guess don't kind of match that consideration of consequences with the immediate, you know, thrill and that reward-seeking behaviour, as they describe it. So, and I should say, I don't know, for what it's worth, I don't know that it's particularly relevant, but you know, I've got my own experience. Just the very, you know, the weekend immediately after we passed the youth justice reforms, my wife and I had our house broken into. We had a young kid pinched the car key and tried to make off with the car, and he, you know, I can't emphasise enough just how petrified this little guy was. Like, it was a really slight. Like I stumbled outside, half asleep, opened the car door. Probably shouldn't have. You don't go after, you know, shouldn't follow behind someone when they break into your house. But yeah, he was really freaked out. So it just laid bare for me just how little understanding there was of the context of what he was doing and what the consequences could be. He just repeated over and over and over, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and then wriggled out the passenger's door and ran away. But yeah, this is a young kid, a small kid. I can't imagine anything less productive for this kid than being locked up.